we will kick off this conference day with discussions on what it takes to be a police commissioner in the United Nations. And we will try to be better in terms of timing, so it will be more time for you to ask questions and comment and give ideas. We are really keen on hearing from you what we don't understand or what can be done better and how we can improve the concept of police peacekeeping. The task of nurturing and training a future generation of UNPOL commissioners is of utmost importance. In the past, we at the Police Division have heard calls to set up special leadership development courses. We have been encouraged to seek nominations of senior police leaders from member states with a view to preparing them for future UNPOL deployments. There have been also ideas to maintain a roster of qualified and trained senior police executives to be considered whenever a police commissioner vacancy comes up. I hope we will be able to discuss this and other ideas through the session. We will hear from my distinguished colleagues who are currently serving as police commissioner, Commissioner Wafi in MONUSCO, Congo, and Commissioner Yiga in South Sudan. We will also be hearing from Stefan Feller, who you already have met yesterday. And last but not least, we will have an excellent opportunity to get the views of the host state on what they expect of UN police and UN police leaders. I haven't seen him yet this morning, but I hope he will show up soon. The Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Vane of Liberia. And with that, I will hand over to Commissioner Wafi.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, distingués collègues et participants à la conférence, je voudrais, avant de faire ma présentation,
colleagues, conference participants. Now, before I come to my presentation, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the German organizers for hosting this conference and for their hospitality. As the head of the police work in the DRC, I would also like to thank the German people for all the work that they have done in our country and for the assistance they've provided to us, especially in policing, which obviously is my sphere of responsibility. It is always difficult to speak following those outstanding presentations we have yesterday by our colleague Ms. Haag, Assistant Secretary General Titov and others, who have actually yesterday already talked a lot about things that I was going to address here today. But I've actually been pondering on that all night, and I made up my mind, should I, cut short or completely change my presentation here this morning, or should I echo things that have been said before? Obviously always running the risk that I'll be a bit repetitive. But then I decided to stick with my presentation as originally prepared, because I think there may be things that have been talked about before, but I'd highlight some other perspectives on them. Now, it's very important, obviously, to talk about the role of police in those peacekeeping missions. And this is precisely what I'd like to do. But I'm going to do that in English now.
To share my views on the very important topic of challenges of leadership in international peacekeeping. I truly believe that the subject of leadership challenges in peacekeeping operations must be at the forefront of the police commissioner's consideration to ensure the implementation of his or her strategic plan is conducted in an efficient and effective manner. For obvious reasons of time constraints, I've kept my presentation fairly simple and centered on the topic of leadership. I will begin with a short overview of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as well as our mandate, the MONUSCO Police mandate. I will then move on to the United Nations Police challenges and try to link them to some of the achievements within the MONUSCO Police component. Finally, I will close with a few comments on the way forward and changes which I believe would lead to better results for peacekeeping operations. Leading a police component is, as you are all aware, a daunting challenge that espouses the constraints of the entire multidimensional peacekeeping operation to which the said police component belongs. MONUSCO, previously known as MONUC, has encompassed a police component since its inception. As in most cases, the United Nations Police in the Congo contributes to basic security in the aftermath of conflict and is jointly with other international and national partners working on capacity building and reform of the national police. In the Congo, with the focus placed on the eastern part of the country, United Nations Police has frequently been confronted not only with aftermath of conflict, but also with the relapse of conflict, a situation that requires flexibility and a proactive stance. One thing that we should constantly bear in mind is that as far as MONUSCO is concerned, and I trust that this is the case in the other peacekeeping operations, United Nations Police is not an isolated component. It is part of peacekeeping operations and therefore faces, at least at the strategic level, challenges similar to those faced by other rule of law components of the missions, talking about corrections, justice support sections, human rights sections. And for us at MONUSCO, the key challenge that we are facing, although we have started to address it, is the need to simultaneously have an early peace-building strategy while implementing a peacekeeping-oriented mandate. Early peace-building strategy is indeed very important in peacekeeping settings. And based on my own experience in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, I would say that such an approach is relevant at least for two reasons. First of all, most of the crises that are addressed through peacekeeping missions are rooted in a way or another in institutional weaknesses in the host country. Furthermore, by putting forward at the inception of peacekeeping mission, peace-building concerns, including those related to capacity or institutional building, sustainability of programs and plans, a police component certainly maximizes its leverage over the local stakeholders at a time when the latter are extremely weak and consequently very open to structural measures or reforms. In a nutshell, the MONUSCO UN Police mandate has four main pillars: the protection of civilians, which sits at the forefront of the MONUSCO mandate, capacity building, the reform of the whole state police, and contributing to the protection of UN personnel and assets through our formed police units, which is an armed wing of the UN police component. Common challenges related to the field of leadership of an international police component are numerous, but in my opinion, the following are probably the most common issues to all missions. International peacekeeping operations have expanded dramatically in scale and scope. Its tasks have become complex, multidimensional, and as a result, need officers with specific skill sets. More and more, we notice that the patrolling and monitoring phase of the mission is reduced to the benefit of the peacemaking phase, where we must concentrate on the development and implementation of the reform and capacity building process. Contributing countries need to be made aware that without the appropriate experience and expertise, our UN police officers do not get the needed level of professional credit and respect from the host country police service to deliver on our mandate. From a leadership perspective, diversity within the UN is both an asset and a challenge. The wide spectrum of cultural and management styles differences amongst contributing countries can be a daunting challenge for a police commissioner. This issue must constantly remain on the leader's radar to prevent the development of unfortunate conflict situations amongst our officers. In most peacekeeping operations, the expectations and priorities of the host state versus the limitations of the United Nations mandate are generally at odds with one another and can lead to delays in mandate implementation. It is imperative for the police commissioner to develop a communication strategy and embark in a consultation process with his partners, and in particular with the senior leadership of the national police. The commissioner must reach a common vision to the reform and capacity building of the national police if he hopes to ensure an acceptable level of success for the United Nations. For a country as vast as the Democratic Republic of the Congo and a population of over 70 million people, the current staffing level of MONUSCO UN police can be considered insufficient. Even with a certain concentration of resources in the eastern part of the country, there are too many regions and communities where we are unable to provide the necessary support to the development and professionalization of the National Police Service. The need to have an appropriate representation of female police officers is crucial. If we are to encourage the host country police service to develop an organization which reflects the community it serves and respect principles of policing in a democratic environment. MONUSCO United Nations Police has 16% of female officers within its ranks and 10.5% overall when including the FPUs, the foreign police units. We constantly scan the CVs provided by United Nations HQ to recruit female officers, but the 20% target has remained an elusive goal for MONUSCO UNPOL thus far. Lastly, a number of our foreign police units at MONUSCO are made up of officers who do not speak French. This makes communication with the personnel of the National Police Service as well as the local population difficult and affects the effectiveness of those units in the Congo. Although the use of language assistance helps in addressing this challenge, it has its limitations. Notwithstanding those challenges, the communication strategy and networking of the MONUSCO Police Senior Management Team has led to some very successful results. We have succeeded in establishing and maintaining a strong collaboration and mutual trust with the senior managers of the hosted police. The professionalism and experience level of the UN police senior managers have gone a long way to facilitate this success. A United Nations police partnership with donors has been established and is being maintained. This was achieved through dialogue, lobbying, and the institution of a viable long-term training program with the Congolese National Police personnel. The link to the long-term National Police Reform Plan and its implementation committee had made the difference in convincing donors to support the initiative were linked to a sustainable capacity building of a professional police service. And I have implemented an information sharing policy within the senior management team to ensure free flow of information and a common vision of our long-term plan as it pertains to capacity building and reform of the national police. Clear lines of responsibilities and accountabilities have gone a long way to support an effective and positive team environment. The empowerment of our UN police officers allows them to clearly see their respective contribution to the UN police mandates. By instituting an effective public information and outreach policy within the component, the activities of the police component in particular and those of the mission in general are now better understood and perceived by the local population. Fewer and fewer people today ask the old question, what is the UN doing in the Congo? What is MONUSCO doing in DRC? Communication within the component and with the National Police Service and the Congolese population represent an ongoing responsibility for us. In collaboration with the Office of the Police Advisor at the UNHQ, we have had some limited success over the past few years in increasing the number of police contributing countries. Canada joined MONUSCO UN Police less than 2 years ago, and just recently, Switzerland announced its intent to deploy police officers to MONUSCO. Although we have not yet been able to reach the 20% target of female officers for our component, we have been able to successfully place a number of female officers in key leadership roles throughout the mission area. However, I believe there is still room for improvement. It is imperative that the mission, through its contingent commanders and the Office of the Police Advisor, continue to proactively lobby the contributing countries to increase the pool of candidates in an effort to target capable and experienced police officers as well as female officers. In particular, these efforts should be strategically directed towards countries with the potential to increase their contribution and those with the potential to join the ranks of the MONUSCO contributing countries. There is also a clear need to increase the number of professional posts in United Nations Police Component, especially at the mission startup phase. This approach would support the safeguard and stabilization of the UN Police corporate memory. As a rule, the lifespan of a UN mission carries over several years, whereas seconded UN police personnel rotates every 2 years, or in some cases, less. For senior positions, dealing with implementation of long-term programs, such as reform and capacity building, this can be a source of frustration for the host country's senior managers who have to rebuild relationships and live with the learning curve of every UN police officer. Having said that, the budgetary restrictions we are all faced with these days will more than likely not be conducive to the creation of more professional posts. Hence, it might be worthwhile for the Office of the Police Advisor to look into the creation of a United Nations Police job-specific recruitment system similar to the professional posts, which would be applied to the list of contributing countries of a particular mission. The peace consolidation phase of every peacekeeping operation usually needs more police presence to ascertain state authority throughout the whole state territory. The downsizing of military contingents should therefore always be preceded with an increase of UN police strength to facilitate the capacity building of the National Police Service in the host country to take over security responsibilities. Thanks again for the opportunity to share my views with this forum, and I look forward to the discussion period with the participants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests present here, dear delegates. My name is Fred Iga, Commissioner of UN Police in the Republic of South Sudan. Before I go through this presentation, I wish to say that when you are a police commissioner in a peace-building situation, you get this feeling of a challenge whose breadths and widths you may not understand until when you are right on the ground where you're expected to perform your duties. We do this work in varying political, social, economic, military situations, so serious that until you get down there on the ground, you may not clearly compose yourself to understand what the task is. Having said that, you operate in a situation where there's a very strong UN mandate to allow you to do your job. There is a very strong demand on the side of the member state where you're working to allow you to do your job. And there's also a serious demand on your own personal character, on how you are going to mobilize, organize, and command the different national resources that you have before you. So it's a position that calls for a kind of character, a personality character that should be able to appreciate, should be able to understand, and should be able to follow issues internationally in order for you to be able to shape a peacekeeping program in that particular country. In my own case, for example, I am dealing with a very rough, a very disturbing history, a very military defined situation in South Sudan. It is in this kind of situation where the police commissioner must guide a peacekeeping operation to make sure that this country, South Sudan, gets on its feet in terms of law enforcement and becomes part of the international fraternity for law enforcement. So the historical perspective is quite strong in South Sudan, and as police commissioner, we must look at it wholesomely and deal with it in line of the peacekeeping principles that the UN has defined for us. Therefore, if you have this kind of background in South Sudan, this automatically means that there's a very weak law enforcement system. It's almost non-existent. as police commissioner, you must consolidate every UN effort to make sure that you start this law enforcement process right from the start. Presently, the number of illegal arms, the issues of a legacy of war in this country present very serious challenges to the police commissioner in shaping peacekeeping activities. Secondly, as police commissioner in South Sudan, you come face to face with ground realities. The personnel are ill-trained, and the word ill is seriously used here because there's no training at all for the police personnel. A big number of them have come to their retirement age, but because there have been gaps in law enforcement development, the police in this country has not been able to recruit, train, and retire officers. So the officers that were police officers 50 years ago before the war started are the same police officers that must be part of the game as we build the police institution in South Sudan. So there are no professional standards to facilitate prevention and detection of crime. There are no legal frameworks to guide the peacekeeping role. Illiteracy, very, very high. The police are ill-equipped. So we are talking about a foundation that the UN peacekeepers must start. You can see in this picture, the UN police are struggling to arrive where they must do their police work, be it community policing, be it speaking to the local communities, be it anything. So if this is what the police commissioner is going to guide on a daily basis, you see where our challenges lie. And these are natural factors, you can't control them. But to be able to create a road in that kind of situation, you need a strong government with money to be able to make sure there's accessibility. But the UN must struggle. You must soldier on. You can't stop doing your work because there's a river in between. You must find every means and ways to make sure that you fulfill your peace-building mandate in that country. Now, these are some of our challenges as the international police. My colleague has talked about some of them. I'm not sure he wasn't reading my notes, but he wasn't. We must ensure that there is capacity and capability among our own armed forces. And how do we ensure this? The only way to do this is to work very closely with the police division in New York, is to work very closely with the member contributing countries, police contributing countries, so that we inform them of the skills, of the capacities that we need in order to handle the special challenge in South Sudan. This mission is unique, as I've already said, because it is set up in a fresh post-conflict situation. 50 years of war, 50 years of armed struggle, 50 years of politics. Finally, we have what we have, a newly independent country, but without any structures to support anything, starting from peacekeeping to political, social, economic programs. The spread of illegal arms everywhere in this country. Peacekeepers are not armed. Peacekeepers are armed with knowledge. They are armed with their brains. They are armed just with their training. So how do you do peacekeeping in a situation that is completely military? And how do you get recognition that you're doing your work in a situation that is structureless? Government itself doesn't have the human resources, social, political, and economic institutions to guide nation building. My friend touched on trust. I'm also touching on trust. I think this is where our biggest strength must lie. We need every support to enable us build trust with the host nations where we are doing peace building. Without this trust, you can't cut across some of the barriers I have just outlined. We need to effectively interpret the mandate. As you go along with your work, you need to make sure the mandate matches realities on the ground. You can see in this picture here, part of our role has to be education on guns, how to handle guns, when are guns useful and when are guns not useful. As police personnel, what is the gun culture within a trained police service? You must do this training in a situation where movement of guns is not controlled. You are teaching 100 people how to handle guns, but there is 1 million out there with guns that are not controlled. But as ANPO, we must persist. As ANPO, we must make sure we have the right policies, the right guidance, the right interpretation of these situations on the ground. And by the way, those people you are seeing on uniform are military. They are police officers because they are putting on that uniform. But our role as ANPO is to make sure we have police officers in those uniforms you're seeing. So it's a double-edged problem in that picture. In South Sudan again, the fighters have been sent to be part of the police force. These are men and women, honorable men and women, who have been fighting for the last 40 years, 50 years, and of recent, about 22 years. And they've crossed over into the police uniform. So our mandate is to make sure that this reality is realized. How do you transform these personnel, change them from the military into the civilian policing thinking? And you are doing this in a situation where there's absence of rule of law systems, where there are inadequate reconciliatory mechanisms among the different groups of the country for them to agree on their differences so that you are able to police them as ANPO. And of course, the arms that we keep talking about. On the other side of the world, within the same world, South Sudan, you get the military groups, local and international, doing their thing within the ANPOL mandate in South Sudan. How do you cut across this? How do you address this? How do you assure the people of South Sudan, as the UN Police Commissioner, that despite all this, we'll be able to get through and make sure we have a stable police service? Cattle rustling are some of the issues. You must have read about them in different literature all over the world. When time comes for different tribes to carry out cattle rustling, it gets bloody. People are killed, houses are torched, children are stolen, if stealing is the right word. There is total confusion everywhere. And these cattle rustling raids are armed. I mean, those who carry them out are armed. So as ANPO Police Commissioner, how do you address this? Do you run away, or do you put in place good programs that must make sure that civilians are protected despite all these problems? We need to provide, therefore, the right guidance to ANPO officers in the field so that there is uniform understanding of our task. If we are vague about our mandate, then there won't be delivery on what we are doing. We need to look at stabilization versus rebuilding and restructuring. Our mission is looked at in a kind of second category role, Conflict is still ongoing in many parts of the mission, and this presents challenges, stabilization challenges. This also presents challenges to the security of our peacekeepers. As we do our job, we must make sure our policies, our activities protect our personnel. As I said earlier on, they are not protected. They are not armed. They are not part of the conflict struggle. So we must present a situation where they are fully protected and allowed to do what they are supposed to do. Partnership challenges. This is one other big challenge that we have. There are many partners in the field. As I said, this is a fresh post-conflict situation. Therefore, many partners come on board to play with us, to make sure we establish peace. And the partners I'm talking about are those that offer international support. For example, UNDP, our biggest partner in the field, UNDP. It's very important that as Police Commissioner, as ANPO, we put in place programs that link our activities so that we don't duplicate efforts and so that the results of our efforts are seen more concretely than when we present them solely alone as ANPO. So without adequate coordination, duplication of efforts is likely to happen. But I'm happy to say that in South Sudan, our efforts to work with our international partners are real, they are there, and we are doing our best on a daily basis to make sure that these efforts are consolidated. Other challenges lie in the political, social, and economic areas. You've heard about the oil struggles in South Sudan, ethnic tribal conflicts and challenges, and in the middle of all this, you have the UN police. So it's also important that as UN police, we understand these challenges and we are able to work out the formulas so that as we design our policies, we are mindful of all these activities around us. In manpower, my friend touched manpower, getting the right skill sets in sufficient numbers from police contributing countries is something UNMISS is addressing at the moment. Early warning should be sent to the police contributing countries as to what unique skill sets are particularly required and where they will be deployed for effective delivery of services. We are designing these programs and we'll make sure through the police division office, our needs and requirements will clearly get to the police contributing countries so that we receive personnel that will be deployed specifically and particularly in different skill sets in order for us to kickstart the institutional building of the police in South Sudan. Diversity of approaches by personnel from different countries. I don't need to labor a lot on this. We come from different policing backgrounds. What puts us together as ANPO is that we are all trained as police officers. Somehow you must go through the basic training program in your country and you must become a police officer. This is the biggest factor that brings us together as ANPO in the different countries where we are. Now, from that, we must be able to create efforts to standardize the reform and transformation approach so that we all start from a point of common knowledge and a point of common practice in international policing. The issue of female representation, I'm sure has been mentioned in this conference. There is an ANPO woman police officer doing her struggles to make sure that the women police officers understand why they are women police officers, why they must contribute, what is their role as women, what are the cultural issues that prevent women from joining the police service, and when they are there, what are the cultural issues that prevent them from standing on an equal parade with the male police officers. These are efforts we are putting in place in South Sudan, and the barriers are still quite big. But we've also realized that women empowerment in South Sudan is going to do a lot in attracting attention from the public about this new police service. There is a way women police officers get accepted when they present their issues. I don't know how to say this, but I have seen this. When you present a group of women police officers before a policing situation, the audience tends to straight away understand what you want to talk about. It's really different from when you present the male police officers. I will go through a discussion with Anna Marie when we get the right time, but there's some magic in promoting the woman police officer. There's something different that happens when you front women police officers through certain policing activities. We need to understand the key issues in police reform programs. As ANPO and also on the part of our counterparts, this is something that we must understand. What are the key issues in police reform? And our counterparts must understand that the driving factor is the acceptance that there is a problem to be solved and that each and everyone in ANPO and the local police service has a role to play. Once we've put in place policies, mechanisms to allow us to understand that there's a problem, then we can sort it out. Without understanding the problem, reform programs can be difficult. Then the challenges of reconstruction, rebuilding, especially in relation to the absent local manpower capacities and so on. The biggest challenge, if I may say, is the management of expectations in the host country. It is important for us to know if the host country understands the UN package and its limitations. Quite often the host institutions and the public expect too much of the UN. And as ANPO, it is our duty to make sure this expectation is kept within the limits. As a result, host counterparts could even choose to be spectators in a situation where they should take the lead and gradual ownership of the reform efforts. So that's part of our challenge. How do we make our counterparts run away from being spectators of what we are doing and instead guide them into accepting our activities and eventually own the reform programs that we roll out? We have challenges in policing operations. The security gap, of course, I've been talking about this security gap. Immediately after the conflict, 2005, the military started functioning as de facto police officers. They could arrest, detain, etc., but without the relevant experience of performing civilian police tasks. So transforming this state of affairs is quite a challenge for ANPO. We must go through those drills like you're looking at, and we must be determined to make sure that our messages run across and are accepted by counterparts. Actual training and reforming of the local police. From this picture you can see sometimes we go through interpreters. There is a guy over there in that pink shirt. He's interpreting what the ANPO officer is saying. If a normal classroom standard lecture takes 25 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, this one will take us 3 hours. But we must learn to be patient. We must design mechanisms that allow us to have a face and be able to persist in our contribution to peace building. And then, of course, the judicial reform efforts, penal reform efforts that we must support. Ladies and gentlemen, this can be a very long talk, but I think at the end of it all, coordination between us, between New York, between our different international colleagues and the host states is a very, very important roadmap to achieving peace building and making in the different policing situations. Thank you very much.
Good morning. We have half an hour left, and I want to give enough time to the Deputy Minister to make what we believe is the most important intervention. I'll try to stick to 15 minutes. So no PowerPoint presentation and no further ado. But I can't spare to relate the issue I'm talking about to the experiences that I have made. So I wanted to start with that I spent 4 years in Kosovo as Deputy Commissioner and Commissioner of the United Nations Police between 2000 and 2004, and 4 years in Bosnia and Herzegovina as Head of Mission Police Commissioner of the European Union Police Mission between 2008 and 2012. In both assignments, I was tasked with capacity and institution building for the police, including all aspects of fighting organized and other serious crime and corruption. Right at the beginning, I want to mention that we have many untold success stories that would underline how important international expert police work abroad in the joint fight against transnational crime is. As is the case for this type of work in our home countries, we will never be able to communicate these success stories for reasons of confidentiality and protection of individuals such as victims and witnesses. And in addition, we always respect the confidentiality rules of our host countries. Without this respect, no professional police would allow external assistance through international police experts. So we have a communication gap with regard to what we do and why it is so important. My experience in planning and conducting missions relates to 16 missions, including police in Eastern Europe, the Western Balkans, the Middle East, Asia and Africa between 2004 and 2008. The challenge of leadership in international police peacekeeping is a complex topic to talk about, and I have chosen 3 aspects that I want to emphasize. For most points, I will demonstrate examples from the 2 field missions that I have led. And we will hear the same again, which is, I think, most important, because I think this is also underlining the importance of the message that Commissioner Wafi and Commissioner Yiga already have mapped out. My arguments are related to things that we here in the room can influence and should. So I will not elaborate on, for example, how important a coherent political framework is for missions and how it impacts on the credibility of policing in peacekeeping. At the end of my contribution, I will have offered 9 requirements for senior police staff in missions. My first point is brief. It's about the political environment of peacekeeping that you have mentioned. Police components or missions act in a political context. They are affected by it, and they affect it. Police commissioners need to be police women and police men with sound expertise in policing, and they need to be astute in acting in an international and local political environment. At the heart of our contribution through police sits the work assisting countries that have or are still experiencing, I think you have mentioned some examples just right now, severe conflict. We do this through contributing to peacekeeping and through assistance to institution building. And I can't but emphasize how important local ownership is. The ability of our police leadership to consult, to advise, to work in the best possible way of assisting rightful local authorities sits front and center on the list of my recommendation. Whenever we fail to identify police leadership that can communicate beyond the technical police level or is not reaching out effectively to host nation stakeholders, Mr. Yiga has mentioned it, Mr. Wafi has mentioned it, it fires back on the credibility of police in peacekeeping. I recall several occasions where the resulting reflex was to consider assigning leadership of such missions to non-police management. This is wrong. So my first recommendation is senior police management in missions has to be able to give advice to political dialogue, and it needs to be given the capability to understand the international and the domestic political dialogue. It needs to reach out to domestic stakeholders in creating maximum local ownership and partnership wherever and as soon as the situation allows. The second theme which is driving my recommendations is what I name, it is never about the police alone, but it is about the police. In Kosovo, from 2002 on, UNMIK police was part of the rule of law pillar of the United Nations mission. The preceding 3 years, we were organized differently. The Security Council Resolution 1244 emphasized the role of the police, authorizing the deployment of international police officers. And when UNMIK leaders realized the capacity gap within the rule of law throughout the early phases of UNMIK, they began to work on broadening the approach that should have been broad from the beginning. In discussions with headquarters, and I may say, according to those who did that, painful discussions with headquarters, this could finally be solved. By 2002, we had an UNMIK police, an UNMIK Department of Justice, and an UNMIK penal management system. Also, we worked in closest collaboration with the international military NATO force, KFOR. Gradually, we established police primacy. At the initial stages, the military had to engage in police tasks. And on the one hand, the military bore responsibility to establish a safe and secure environment in rough times, but also the international police arrived late and only gradually. Furthermore, the situation did not allow for immediate full police deployment, at least not unprotected. This collaboration between police and military was intense, with an increasing lead by the police on basis of joint strategic agreements. So what I say is establishing a safe and secure environment is a daunting task, and you have to live with it on a daily basis right now, my colleagues. The disengagement of military power and the engagement of police power is never linear. It's a bumpy road at minimum, riddled with setbacks like potholes, and it is requiring utmost cooperation, communication, and coordination between stakeholders with responsibility for security and order. I need to tell you about Bosnia and Herzegovina. The European Union police mission followed on to the United Nations International Police. In its early years, UPM came with an almost pure police composition. Over 10 years of the UPM, police officers continued to be an important part, and the police commissioner always was a police officer. However, police were not the majority of all mission staff at later stages. The police commissioner had an increasing percentage of lawyers, judges, prosecutors, penal management and security sector reform experts under his command, and a considerable number of political advisors. Also in Bosnia, we worked with the military, the European Union force, EUFOR, and we, the UPM, had the policing lead, including in assisting in the fight against organized and other serious crime. We had common operational guidelines that we had developed jointly. I could continue with examples from other theaters of operation where I have been, but I don't want that. But I want to offer one observation. On occasion, with limited cohesion between senior personnel from all stakeholders' side, the impact on the implementation of each one's mission mandate was negative. This holds true in civil-military cooperation, and it is holding true for all technical and political elements of the international community. So I have wondered, what is it what we here in the room can influence? My second recommendation is senior police management in missions has to be strategic and able to fully operationalize a strategy. Strategy without operationalization is as bad as operational action without strategy. My third recommendation is police leadership needs to be highly collaborative and able to communicate in the broadest of all terms. The success of any mission depends on its leadership enforcing a policy of comprehensive communication without any artificial barriers. All too often, leadership channels information up and down through the chain of command where it will trickle in and disappear. Rather, leadership needs to communicate broadly, whilst maintaining a policy of decision-making separate from this broad communication, using well-established collaborative management techniques. Fourth, police leadership needs to be able to integrate staff with most diverse qualification, background, and culture, we have heard it, including law, other specialized, and political staff. 5, police leadership needs to strategically work together with other mission components and with the larger international community under most challenging circumstances. They need to be able to develop and to contribute to a vision that will take all stakeholders on board, including international and national counterparts. I say it again, I can't emphasize how important the development of a joint vision with stakeholders on the host state side is. So, if I say that this type of officer appears to be a scarce resource, at least when it comes to availability for international assignments, what are we going to do? Those who have successfully passed through their first senior assignments usually come back with considerable experience. And they are finding themselves in a national career development program, if there is one, which leaves much to chance and self-initiative. And I have come to understand that I'm not talking about a German issue, I'm talking about a worldwide issue. I have had it in almost every discussion that I have led over the past 12 years. But I also say there is no alternative. We can't assign most ambitious tasks to police and peacekeeping without assigning capable leadership. If the gap between expectation and delivery gets too large and lasts too long, fatigue is the consequence. My third theme is possibly that one that drives me most. It is possible and necessary to integrate strategic contributions of police in peacekeeping into a broad-based and long-term undertaking. And I want to do what I do very often. I quote from the World Development Report 2011, issued by the World Bank, where you will find the sentence, restoring confidence and transforming security, justice, and economic institutions is possible within a generation, even in countries that have experienced severe conflict. And I now pronounce it different. My emphasis lies on generation. In our context here, this means that police in peacekeeping operations must recognize that they contribute to an international engagement post-conflict, which is broader and will last significantly longer than their own mandate and life cycle. The resulting challenges I have already partly mentioned. The horizontal aspects it is all about cohesion and cooperation between different stakeholders in the theater. But the vertical ones are related to the arrow of time. International support activities often follow on to previous. There is a need of continuity on a most strategic multi-annual level, often overspanning more than a decade. Therefore, peacekeeping sets the stage for many other engagements of the international community to follow. In light of the time, I'm reducing my 2 examples that I have, but I have to mention them. We were tasked in Kosovo in 1999 not only to substitute, but also to develop a Kosovo police service. something for which no blueprint existed, and there were no recommendations. Nobody has told us how to do it. So how did we do it? The first phase was, okay, we recruit officers and we train them. That was 1999 to 2000 in the beginning. And in 2000 in the beginning, I witnessed that for the first time we were trying to forecast how are we going to proceed throughout the next year. We didn't have any information about where we would end up. We had no parameters, we had nothing. So we could only project 1 year. But we then used this year and the following year in order to evaluate, and that enabled us in 2002 to present to the United Nations headquarters a comprehensive plan of the development of an independent indigenous Kosovo police service ready for action by the end of 2006. This plan was flexible enough and robust enough to survive even the difficult challenges of the March riots in 2004, where we only had to re-evaluate and to rearrange, but we were still able, until the end of 2006, to deliver throughout the mandate of several stakeholders and at least 2 police commissioners. That is possible. I may also say that at one point I was asked, well, can you do it shorter? And I said, well, okay, if you want me to, but then this thing will implode. You cannot shoot police officers through a rank-and-file system like rockets and establish an organization that is sustainable. It takes time. So we had to do that. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the story that I wanted to tell would have to deal with what we did in 3 phases over 3 years. And that what I can tell in light of the limited time is that within these 3 phases, we had technical phases of establishing the mission and also later on to assist authorities in increasing their abilities to fight organized and other serious crime. But there was a middle phase where we were also mandated to contribute to police reform. And the way the international community, which was still strong at that time, had set it up was that the requirements that would stand at the end of the police reform were brought to public by a European Commission report in 2003, completely reforming that existing system into a hierarchical system that was meant to overcome some barriers that also were enshrined in the peace agreement for Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Dayton Peace Agreement. Thus, that mission received a task that was not technical any longer, but was deeply engaging in political issues. And these political issues were not solved and were not able to be solved by a technical mission like UPM. What, throughout everything, kept us alive was that we separated a dialogue with politics from entering politics, and that kept us credible until the end, including that we, and that is something I spare, developed multi-annual plans how we could finish our job and also how we could transition into something that was not peacekeeping any longer, that was not crisis management any longer, but further assistance. So the Bosnia example says we look back at 17 years of international policing, including 7 years of UN police peacekeeping and 10 years of EU police in crisis management operations, and several years of assistance through the European Commission are to follow. And that is what I mean with a generation. So number 6 on the list of my recommendations, and I need 2 minutes more, is that senior police leaders need to stay for a longer period. At minimum, they should stay for 2 years. In my view, 3 years might be ideal. 7, senior police leaders must have the proven ability to base their contribution on a vision, to translate this vision into a multi-annual strategy, to lead the annual operationalization, and to be prepared for being held accountable. both within the international chain of command and in a sense of true commitment to domestic ownership also by those we all work for, the host nations. Number 8, senior police leaders must have the ability to communicate this inside their mission with other mission components and in the host nation on the interface between technical police work and political policy making. They need to be able to communicate with ministers. And number 9, senior police leaders must have the ability to distinguish between advising the political dialogue and entering it. The latter must be avoided as it adversely affects the credibility of policing and peacekeeping. Thanks for your patience and for your attention.
Good morning. I started my morning on a 2-trip journey today. I got close to the foreign ministry here where we are convening and realized that I needed to be ID'd by the guards. Then it occurred to me that I was not on Capitol Hill in Monrovia, but that indeed I was in a foreign land and I had to come to grips with the reality. So I had to make the second trip. But I'm glad that I'm here, that I made it. The question that is put forth is one that is pointed and that policy makers such as myself, will have to reckon with. Do we have our mandate right? Are we doing what we've been asked to do? Let me be quick to say that police peacekeeping, and to even draw it down to the reality of the work that you do, it's one of those jobs that very few people in our world would love to do. It is not the most attractive because the environment in which you work is a very volatile environment. It is not always the smooth and accommodating type. But your challenge is to bring calm to that volatile environment. In Liberia, we have enjoyed the calm of your work. When President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf administration took over, all of our structures were in deplorable shape. Our enforcement agencies, particularly the police, did not exist. But through your help over the years, we've been able to establish what we will call the Liberian National Police Force. Hasn't come easy. But what we have on the ground at the moment, and what we have to work with, what those police officers have to deal with on a regular basis, raises another question. Do we have the hardware and the software to operate with? And I want to use this computer analogy for the rest of my comments. All of the manufacturers over there, Lenovo, IBM, HP, They'll put together beautiful hardware for us. But after the hardware, we need to put the software to get the computer to become functional, to deliver as you gave command. International police peacekeeping is now faced with that challenge in my country. You've done an excellent job as far as your mandate dictates. And that has been underscored by previous speakers here. It is a volatile situation. It's a volatile environment. But you have the responsibility to bring calm, to make sure that laws created by the people of that environment, those laws are obeyed, that people live under a condition of calm. That's your mandate. But the people who are in the streets of Monrovia and other cities, in the 15 counties we have there, and the police officers that have to deal with them, they have a challenging situation. Yes, you transfer all of the good knowledge on the how, but then the hardware to work with is inadequate. And we talked about some of that yesterday. In the case of Liberia, police, they lack the necessary gear to function. They do not have sufficient vehicles to be able to cover the area of assignment. Some of them have only a pair of uniform. That means that after an assignment, maybe a week's assignment, that person has to stay away from work perhaps 2 days to take the uniform to the laundry, get it prepared for the next day. So these are the hardware challenges I'm talking about that is right on the ground. Then they have to respond to calls. They have to do night watch. Because in most of the post-conflict countries, you have a situation of high unemployment. You know, when you have high unemployment, establish the basis for uncivil behaviors. And it is the police duty to bring order to such a situation. What is the hardware with which this police officer can carry out the duty? It's a challenge. So when you look at the mirage of the challenges that police officers have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and you ask the next question: are we making the right investment in international police peacekeeping? Whatever we pass on to police officers in a post-conflict environment, is that model sustainable? That the government of the day in that country is able to utilize that model, work with that platform, and achieve peace and calm in that environment? Do we have to revisit the UN mandate and look at it and match it against the reality on the ground? They are excellent. Mandate is excellent. But I guess when you put the whole world community together, This is the compromise mandate that we can come up with. But when you hit the ground, changes in the realities there raises the concern as to whether we are indeed getting it right, whether the software and the hardware are present, and whether they are coordinated in their work. These, for us, are the challenges that we see in Liberia. Training is excellent. I was fortunate last night to talk with a colleague from Fiji who served very diligently in Liberia, participated in curriculum development in those early days. And I salute him and the people of Fiji for the sacrifice that they made to get us where we are. The same goes for Germany, that has been occupied with our crisis since 2004, particularly policing, and many other countries. List goes on. You know that our security currently is in the hands of the international community. And we need that environment to be able to do all of the things that states are required to do for the betterment and the welfare of their people, to create jobs, to train people to the skills of the future. We need all of the hardware to be in place. The international community is helping us to expand our courts throughout the countryside. That is great. There are reforms taking place in our justice system. That is great, because it is a complementary connection to what police do. When you arrest, people must be tried. And there must be court, and there must be lawyers. There must be judges who can impartially adjudicate these matters. But that whole arresting process, what police officers go through to achieve it, being fully uniformed, being fully geared, being mobile, both with vehicle as well as communication, being able to subdue aggression and bring control to the situation, we might need to look at it a little bit, particularly if we want that model to be sustained by the government on the ground in that place. So these are the general comments that I want to make from the standpoint of the experiences that we are having in Liberia. And that does not in any way detract from the job, the excellent job that all of you are doing. It's wonderful. That is the limit of your mandate. But we can stretch it a little bit more by raising more resources to empower these volatile areas so that the hardware is also there. Because what is coming is the software. But the hardware in most of these places are absent. You want good returns on your investment. But these things have to be done so that partners in the international community who fund most of these undertakings can derive the anticipated benefit from these undertakings. I want to thank the German government as well as the United Nations for organizing this session and giving us the opportunity to participate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, all speakers. It was a very interesting morning, and as usual, we are behind schedule. But I will violate a little bit on the coffee break because I think it's important to get comments from you as well. I will just do a couple of things that I just wanted to comment on, also from the panel that I picked up. And of course, I have to start with Commissioner Yiga's magic about female police officers and what different it makes. And I would just want to ensure you, I didn't pay him to say that. It was based on pure experience. It was also mentioned the transformation from military into police, and that is a struggle that we still are facing very often. The mindset is still very, very military oriented. And I cannot let this opportunity go away. And those who know me knows that I always give this example. You will never hear me say police force unless I give this example. I always use police service. And the reason being, it is about mindset. If you wake up in the morning and you go to your work in a police force, it makes a difference, or if you work in a police service. And as you all know, most of the time we spend on giving service as police officers and not using force. So for me, that's something that really illustrates the mindset. And also uniforms was mentioned here, and that's also something that has been on my agenda. I have not succeeded in that way, but I have never understood why police officers have camouflage uniforms. We're supposed to be visible and not hide. So I think that's something we could take on, all of us, to try to see what we can do in that area. Finally, skill sets were mentioned. I think it was Commissioner Wafi who spoke about that. And just to let you know that we are now asking missions to give us in advance what skill sets they see need of in the future. So we give those needs of skill sets to member states, our permanent missions in New York, 6 months in advance for member states to plan and select the right officers. With that, I would like to take a couple of questions before we break for coffee. Yes, please.
Colonel Al-Amraoui from Tunisia. First of all, I'd like to thank quickly the German government for hosting this conference. And I'd like also to thank the United Nations, and precisely the United Nations Development Program, for helping us in Tunisia restructure and reform our security system. I was listening this morning to the 2 presentations, I think by Mr. Wafi and Mr. Yiga, and I noticed a clear call for the increase of the number of officers in the United Nations missions, precisely in Africa. And among what I personally noticed in my country is that the first condition and the first qualification for an officer to be recruited within the United Nations missions is the English language. Here, I'd like to ask the question, there are some countries which are French speakers. That is, if we take the case, for example, of Congo or any other country in which French is the language of the population, so why do we impose the English language? And here I'm talking about the case of Tunisia. In Tunisia, for example, as you know, French is the 2nd language spoken by the population, and most of the people, most of the officers speak French. That is, I believe that in certain missions, we do not need the English language to be the first condition. It could be an option, yes, but it couldn't be the first language on which basis we select candidates. If you want, in other words, I prefer that in certain missions, and I suggest we give priority to the French speakers, to the French-speaking officers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I quickly, or Commissioner Wafi, yeah.
Je voudrais remercier le délégué tunisien pour sa question et lui donner la réponse En ce qui concerne le déploiement des officiers de police dans la MONUSCO, la mission des Nations Unies en République démocratique du Congo, c'est une mission qui est francophone et nous n'avons aucun problème pour recevoir des officiers francophones. La grande majorité de nos officiers sont francophones. Naturellement, c'est vrai, comme je le dis souvent, pour nous, le premier choix d'un officier, c'est un officier bilingue de préférence. C'est-à-dire qui parle aussi bien le français que l'anglais. Mais personnellement, en tant que police commissioner, j'ai reçu des officiers uniquement francophones, ils ont fait un excellent travail. J'ai reçu des officiers bilingues, ils ont fait un très bon travail. Mais j'ai reçu aussi des officiers anglophones, j'ai réussi à les utiliser à bon escient en fonction de leur performance pour les placer dans des sections où on peut travailler en tant que UNPOL en n'utilisant que l'anglais. Cela aussi est une question de leadership, de savoir utiliser toutes les ressources disponibles en fonction des spécificités de chacun et de pouvoir amener les uns et les autres à former une équipe tout en ayant une performance remarquable. Et donc, je serai très heureux en tant que chef de la police des Nations Unies en République démocratique du Congo de recevoir des officiers tunisiens. Nous sommes disponibles. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. And I can assure you that we are trying to get Francophone. It's not English as a priority. It is also French, but that is a challenge. We also have missions that require Arabic, which is even more difficult. But I can assure you we are doing, and I have invested a lot of time myself to bring more Francophone capacity into missions. More questions? I see something in the back. Yeah. And there.
Is it me? Francis from Zambia. I want to learn from the two commissioners in the, and the missions in South Sudan and Congo DRC. We've heard from Mr. Stefan that when he was in Kosovo, there's a successful story that he managed to put up a national police force after the breakdown of the structure of the previous police force. I haven't heard from the two gentlemen whether there is any way that has been made by the missions in these two countries, South Sudan and Congo DR, as to the creation of the national police forces in these countries. And of course, we have talked about the challenges which are there. But are you making any headway in ensuring that we have established structures for the national police forces in these two countries? Thank you.
Thank you. I will take a couple of more questions. Yes.
My question is to Commissioner Iga. He has painted a gloomy picture of the situation in South Sudan, particularly this issue of cattle rustlers. I don't know whether the mandate given to the military there includes confronting that kind of situation headlong. What I mean here is, the police are not armed, so definitely they cannot face this kind of situation. So wherever that kind of situation arises, I expect the police to withdraw. So I don't know whether the military are given it's part of their mandate to go and confront these people and deal with the situation, because there is a lot that is expected from the UN mission there by the local people there. Otherwise, I don't see any hope. A situation where a group of people will go and attack a particular community, kill, maim, and abduct them, that is too bad. So please, I want to know whether the mandate includes dealing with that kind of situation, because I should expect those kind of people to be arrested,
or even kill in the process of trying to arrest them. So what is the situation, please?
Thank you. From the back, yes.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Patrick from the Australian Police. Let me join others to continue the felicitation to the German government and the United Nations, especially again to the United Nations in supporting us through our own conflict. Now we're in the stage of development, and we are giving back to the world by sending peacekeepers. Just of recent times, I think Sierra Leone has come on to contribute so much, especially to Darfur. We have over 300 people on standby for deployment to Darfur. We are aware of the constraints to get to Sudan, visas, and yet we are hearing about missions that lack personnel, like DRC, MONUSCO, and South Sudan. We have specialized women. We have 101 female officers on standby, qualified on gender issues, especially on gender issues, close protection unit, and so on. We wonder why the DPKO cannot take up this issue to see how these females who are so badly needed in areas like DRC, where we're hearing about so much rape and gender issues. Why won't you use the services of these ladies who are on standby, still waiting visas? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, over there.
Thank you. I'm from China. The Chinese delegation also want to join our colleagues in thanking the United Nations for hosting this meeting, and also the hospitality of the government of Germany for the hospitality of the wonderful meeting and the social events. My question is concerning the two mission areas in Liberia and the South Sudan, because we have Chinese police contingents in the two missions. One of the issues is regarding the female police officers, because we don't have any female police officers in the mission yet. The issue is not because we don't want to send female officers, it's because we don't have any issues regarding inequality or discrimination of opportunities for female police officers. It's rather because of their decision maker think more about the security and safety of female police officers in the mission area regarding the extremely hard living conditions, the challenges and the threats that the female officers might facing more than the male officers. And also, I think one of the most important issue we are facing is when the contingent is exchanging, the overlapping time is very short for the officers. When they first arrived, it took them a lot of time to find housing first, to find a place to live. And they don't know where to live, where to eat, and how they could think about how to work well. This is the difficulty they are facing in the mission area right now. And also, I think this is also an important issue for the female officers when they first arrive. And we would suggest that if the United Nations, in joining with our host countries, to improve the housing arrangement for the officers, if possible, to increase the camping area or build a secured area or zone for the police officers to live, and maybe at least you can provide temporary housing for them when they first arrive, so it could facilitate and help them to be involved in their peacekeeping missions but much better. Thank you.
Thank you. And one more there, yeah.
Thank you very much, the conference. Good morning, everybody. I'm Major Kojo from Togo. I would rather like to state in French. My question will be for the whole panel. Depuis hier, nous avons de cesse
Since yesterday, we have repeatedly and often talked about the fact that more women should get involved in peacekeeping missions. With respect to UNPOL missions, women are very committed to peace worldwide, and I personally obviously approve of that. But my question is, or is it really a question? Is it an idea? Is it a thought that we should ponder on? In the sense that you shouldn't take things away from one, category of people and give it to others. Because precisely the situation that we were facing in Darfur was that we had a major incident or severe incident where a Liberian or a police officer, I think from Sierra Leone, actually from Aisha was her name, who died during the mission, and her death has caused major distress in the entire mission area over that entire week. Also, IDPs in the region were under severe shock learning about that death. Now, if you bear in mind how much women are indeed active and committed to the cause of peace in the world, alongside their male colleagues, and well, if you want to go forward with the participation of women, you also must realize that they are subject to to incredible risks at times, and because the missions that UNPOL officers are facing out there obviously can be done by men or women, but when we realize that until this very day that there have been casualties among the population of UNPOL officers, which we want to avoid in the future, but it's still going to happen, and it will happen, and it will be women that will be killed in missions in action. And if you bear in mind that we want to achieve a 50-50 or 40% target, this also quite automatically leads to a situation where women will be subjected to those risks more, just by the sheer quantity. So if we consider, yes, there should be an equal presence of women and men in police or peacekeeping missions serving the cause of peace in the world, well, we should also think about whether or not we should also grant guarantees to those women, personal, if you will, safety guarantees, while they do their jobs. And we realize also that even member states themselves are not doing enough, obviously, to second adequate personnel to police peacekeeping missions. So, in short, it's not enough personnel. We don't have enough women for those missions. Although, and obviously, the deployment of women would be extremely important for our missions to be successful in the long term. So, really, shouldn't we think about personal guarantees to women? What can we tell them? What can we assure them in the sense that we're going to do something for your own personal safety? Because if you realize and if you know that the guarantors or the guarantees for peacekeepers in any type of peacekeeping operation worldwide, because they are also, if you will, the guarantors for peace, that also means that those who are ensuring peace also, should be able to enjoy personal safety and personal protection. There should be people alongside them that guarantee their personal safety. Now, let's now take our panel members to answer those questions. I'll be answering in French, and my colleague will do the same in English.
Pour la disponibilité du personnel féminin, particulièrement ceux qui ont des capacités dans la lutte contre les violences faites aux femmes, en ce qui concerne la République démocratique du Congo.
We need women who are specialized on sexual assaults against women. Within the in the Republic of Congo, unfortunately, they have a sad record. They top the league with regard to violence against women. Because these women were attacked in camps, And as soon as in these regions there are attacks, these attacks are against women and children. Well, pretty rich country, there's a lot of raw materials in the soil, but it's again and again that women and children are attacked. They are attacked more frequently than any others, and we need very strong, very competent women for these missions, women who are prepared to do the training for the specialized units that we conduct together with the international community. So we need women with a lot of experience and women with specific skills, and that is well, after the speech of our Norwegian friends yesterday, I said we would like to have something similar as to what you did in Haiti, and therefore we would very much welcome such women, even if those women maybe only knew English. Even then we would need them. And another point regarding the vulnerability of women with the dump, there's certain security procedures for women in these missions, and there is a whole plethora of measures to protect these women. There's specific or special measures that are used for women who are on night shift or who go home late in the evening from their office and they are escorted. Women are not exposed to more risks than men in these missions. Since I assumed the leadership for this mission in Congo, I have never seen any deficit with regard to the security situation of women. The question regarding the role or the added value that you obtain when deploying women, I want to say the following. I want to comment this as follows. Well, I'm a practitioner, and as such, it is not just important to obtain a 20% participation of women. This is not just a target that is politically correct. No, it is an added value, and that is what I can see during my day-to-day work in Congo. When we have a look at the practical work, the women who were raped are more prepared to talk to a woman police officer than to a male police officer. And the same holds true for children. They have more confidence, more trust in women than in men. And in order to protect these women, we have to need female police officers right on the front line. They see women that were raped or children that very young children even that had suffered violence, and when they then confront a female police officer, that makes a lot of difference for them. And we also want to bring the perpetrators to justice. That is a different phase, but in the phase before that, we need female police officers. This is not just about achieving a certain target percentage because it is politically correct, but we need these women because they are an asset. These female police officers are very courageous. They have no difficulty in working in conflict zones. They are prepared to do that. We started a UNPOL office in Congo. This is the frontline office, so to say, with confronting and fighting a terrorist organization in that area. And we have a female police chief there. She runs the police operations there, and also with regard to Côte d'Ivoire and the massacre against elephants in that region. This is also part of our task there, and we need the female police officers for that. We have to make it clear to the member states that it is very important that we get female police officers. They are necessary for our mandate to fulfill our mission, because our day-to-day work makes it necessary to have female police officers. And in order to answer to a question that came up here, well, with regard to the success that we achieve with our peacekeeping missions, I can only say yes. Yes, we are successful. I do not want to go into any details, but the UN police does a wonderful job, and the international community, our partners, and the other stakeholders have actually confirmed our success and have congratulated us on our success. And it would not be possible to continue this work without UNPOL. Our work is a very important work. It is highly esteemed. And this afternoon I have to leave because in Kinshasa we're going to have the summit of the French-speaking countries. The French president will be there, and other VIPs, and they will meet there, and we will also talk about the importance of having these peace missions on the spot in order to promote peace in the world.
The first one is the gloomy picture in South Sudan. I'm very sorry for that impression, but this is the reality. I can't make it more gloomy than I've made it, because this is the way it is. But in South Sudan, our UNPOL officers have no executive policing powers. So if they don't have these powers, then it is upon our mandate to make sure that they are protected all the time. If the situation gets volatile, our first priority is for our officers to be protected. And after they've been protected, then the military wing of the mission comes in and fills in for our absence. The military component of the mission works with the SPLA, the army, the national army, to sort out issues like cattle rustling. However, we don't go docile completely. We act between the curtains, behind the curtains. Right now, we are supporting the development and training of the auxiliary police forces. These are forces that will be deployed in areas where conflict has reduced. So we are supporting the training of these forces. We are supporting the programming. We are supporting developing curricula. We are making sure there are principles in handling guns and so on and so forth. So this is what we are doing, and we hope these auxiliary police forces will be able to do something about cattle rustling and educate the people in a community policing fashion about the dangers of cattle rustling. Successes, yes, we've made a lot of success as UNPOL in South Sudan, and this success is related to the MOU. We have an understanding now with the government of South Sudan, with the police administration in South Sudan, that we must work together and we must put in place certain internal mechanisms to manage the police service. Right now, we are about to wind up with the registration of all the forces. As I told you, we are getting forces from everywhere. We need to have a record of who is who in South Sudan, who is trainable and who is not trainable. And we have supported this process. And I think a month from now, we should be able to have straight registers of who is in the police in South Sudan and who is not. We have put in place administrative structures, command and control structures, right from the top up to the bottom. We've done leadership training, and we are training from the top because we think if the top understands what we are talking about, then we should be able to make the whole police service understand our story. We have a police act in place. We have rules and regulations in place. We are supporting the training of important units like the border police, the diplomatic protection police, and so on and so forth. So really, there is now a lot of inroads, between UNIMIS, UNPOL, and the government counterpart. So there's a lot of progress, there's a lot of success. About the women raised by our Chinese colleague, I'm sure Anna Marie will be able to respond to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have missed the whole coffee break, so I have the following proposal. There were a couple of questions that maybe wasn't responded now, but the one with 300 ready police officers, come and see me and we can deal with that offline. And those of you who were not able to ask a question, please put it down on a piece of paper, give it to us here, and we will try to find time throughout the day and come back on those questions. I have also been told to tell you there is a list circulating. Please put your email address on that if you want to receive the materials, the presentations. So please make sure your email address is on that list that is being circulated. If we could try to have coffee in 15 minutes so we can start the next session. Yeah, thank you very much.